star. Wooden floors, walls, and windows. Good morning, Year 8! Welcome back after a lovely half term. I'm sure you spent loads of it walking around, reading books, soaking in nature in this wonderfully sunny weather, even if it is slightly disconcerting just how warm and dry it is. But anyway, I won't blather about the weather too long because you've got some work to do today. Time to get cracking. So, what you've got is a selection of creative tasks, all based around the poem that we were doing at the end of last half term, Dreamers by Siegfried Sassoon. Now, it'll be helpful to continue thinking about war because the next poem that you're going to go on to is also a Siegfried Sassoon poem about war. But what you've got today is a choice between 4 different tasks. I'll run through each one. I recommend that once you've chosen one of the tasks, you could go back to that option and just listen again to the instructions. So, option A. This is a propaganda poster forcefully encouraging people to maintain social distancing during the global pandemic. Now, what would a propaganda poster look like? I've got a few examples. These are things that you'd probably recognise, mostly from history lessons about war. This is one about recruiting people to the army. This is one about women working in factories. And here's one trying to convince American people that they should enter the Second World War to protect the UK. All of these have got a very clear aim. This one wants to convince people looking at the poster of something. Now, what are you trying to convince people of in your poster? Well, because a lot of people have linked our current pandemic situation to the war, rightly or wrongly, you're going to be making a poster which uses propaganda trying to get people to stay indoors during the global coronavirus pandemic. Now, of course, the government seems to be changing the rules a little bit, and now certain things are being relaxed, but perhaps you could try and make a propaganda poster suggesting that people maintain social distancing instead. So even though we're entering a new period, it's still vital that people are practicing good hygiene, that they're social distancing, carrying out those other measures. So you can either do this by hand, or you could do it on your computer, maybe as a visual poster on Paint perhaps, or another program like that. You want to try and think of what your simple message is that you want to communicate. Okay, so option B, a speech to the government about the struggles of being kept in lockdown. So, of course, it's not been very easy for us, spending so much time in a single environment, spending so much time around the same group of people, not getting to see your friends, all the other problems that I'm sure you know well about to do with lockdown. So, you're going to give a speech to the UK government, just like Siegfried Sassoon did in our last lesson, where he was talking about the need to end the war. He cared a huge amount about that topic, which is why the speech was so powerful. Did they listen to him? Not necessarily. They didn't end the war early, but he gave it his best shot. So you're going to give your best shot at describing as if you were speaking to the UK government. So of course your language will need to be relatively formal. You're going to be speaking to the UK government and explaining about the struggles of being in lockdown. So you could talk about the struggle of not being able to see your friends, difficulty of completing schoolwork online. I know it's not always easy. The sadness of not being able to travel over the summer break, to see perhaps friends, family, go and visit places. So you could copy and paste this and use that as the start of your letter, and then think about how over a couple of paragraphs you could explain these struggles. Really try, like in Siegfried Sassoon's letter, to show the emotional impact of these. Okay, option C is a letter to a friend from the front line of lockdown outlining the reality of the experience. Quite similar to the speech, but perhaps you might want to write something a little bit less formal. Now, this is building on the fact that during the First World War, letters from people at the front line to their families, remember in the poem they're dreaming about their families back home, they were a really common feature of the experience of fighting in war. You would hear about how your family were doing back home, and they would hear about how you were doing fighting in the war, which might seem surprising in a way with so little infrastructure you'd imagine at the front line, but they still had lots of posts. So, things you could cover in the letter: benefits or positives about being in lockdown, new skills or hobbies you might have spent time perfecting, activities you've completed with your family. So think about maybe some of the same ideas from the letter, but communicating things that you think a friend might want to hear. Okay, so option D is an analytical paragraph about whether or not the pandemic should be compared to wartime. So, this is your chance to think about, well, do I think that all of these stories about how what we're going through now is like a war, is that actually pointless and a slightly dangerous exercise? To what extent do you agree with this statement? Well, some people would say that comparing a coronavirus to a war isn't that helpful because, of course, in a war, we're fighting an enemy and there's all of this aggression to do with it. People are losing their lives in a very different way, so the way that we pull together has to be different too. Although there are plenty others that say that it is helpful to be able to use this language because then we all understand what we have to do together. In a war, you come together to fight for a single cause, and we've all got to come together to try and help each other maintain the measures of lockdown to maintain health and protect the NHS. So you could just write a paragraph discussing whether or not you think that the pandemic is like a war or if it is pointless and dangerous to compare it to a war. If you want ideas, I really recommend the article that I just showed you and have a little read of that before commencing the task. Okay, so when you've chosen your task, you can write the task, and either if you're doing a poster, you could submit it as a separate file, or you can write it under each option here. And then when you're finished, submit it. I'll have a little look, and once you have chosen that task, choose one other, because I think might be a little too little if you just do one task in the lesson. You could do maybe a poster if you've done the letter. If you've done the speech, you could do the poster. If you've done the speech, maybe you could think about whether or not really this is like war or not. So once you've finished, submit those. I'll have a look over them. Good luck.